Now, I thought that I would be introducing the CEO of B&Q, Ewan Sutherland, this afternoon. However, Ewan sent me an email at 4:10 this morning saying that he was actually unable to get here. He couldn't get down the road because there was thick snow. So Ewan hasn't been able to make it. But I'd like to introduce Matt Sexton, who's the head of corporate and social responsibility for B&Q, to talk about B&Q's goals. And I think B&Q has done incredible work in the space of conventional sustainability for many years. As many of you will know, I was sponsored by Kingfisher PLC for a very long time, an 8-year partnership. And I went to various different events, and I was always inspired by in many ways, the fact that they were quite humble. I remember going to a presentation 10 years ago when they were talking about FSC wood. And I think it was about 95% of the wood in B&Q was FSC. And I thought, well, why don't you talk about that? And they just turned around and said, it's not 100%. So B&Q are now at the beginning of the next stage of that journey. Yes, they're doing a lot, but they are looking at changing the whole business model of B&Q. I stood at a conference with Ewan about 4 weeks ago. It was the Prince of Wales's Start conference. And Ewan said in his first line, maybe in the future, retailers like B&Q won't sell anything anymore. And there was a real silence because nobody expected him to say anything remotely like that. And I think it shows the commitment to thinking differently at B&Q, but they know they are absolutely at the beginning of the journey. And the challenges they face are huge. And like Steph said yesterday, I want to do this, I want to make this happen, but where do I start? I think B&Q in this space are in a very, very similar position. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Matt to talk about that very goal.
Well, Ellen got about 3 hours more warning than I did that I was going to be giving this speech. So I guess what you're looking at here is downcycling in action. You were going to get the chief exec of B&Q. He's been downcycled into the director of social responsibility. But obviously, if this goes well, maybe I get upcycled and I've become the chief exec of B&Q. So who knows? It's a pivotal 40 minutes for me, so do bear with me. I guess what we wanted to talk about today was there have been some really inspirational lectures over the last couple of days, and I was here last night to see the Desso presentation as well. And we've seen companies which are really making some great strides into the world of closed loop. Now, I won't lie to you, B&Q is not such a company at the moment, but we have an ambition to get there. But our scale and complexity is such that will take some time, and we don't have the answers right now. Now, we've made some very good reductions in our levels of environmental impact. We have cut our fuel use by 24%, our store electricity use by 20%, 97% of our timber now has full chain of custody. So we've done all this good stuff, and I think it's very important that we keep going with that stuff, because whilst we acknowledge that it is not the long-term answer, we get that. We get the fact that linear systems are not going to work long time. I think our feeling is it will buy us time. So we intend to keep going on that and keep I was going to say pedal to the metal, it's a singularly inapt phrase to use, in terms of reducing our inputs. But we do understand that we have to move to a different way of working. And it is probably our very scale which makes that a real challenge for us. We are not a company with 10 or 20 product lines. We have 35,000 product lines. We have 3 million customers coming through our doors every single week. We turn over in the region of £65 million a week, a vast number of transactions, 1,200 direct suppliers, each of whom is supplied by maybe 10 or 20 secondary and tertiary suppliers. So there is a huge scale issue that we have to tackle. So what I wanted to share with you today, as a company that I suppose has taken leadership on some sustainability issues, are the challenges of a business like ours moving towards a closed-loop system. An honest appraisal of where we are on that journey, what our current thinking is, what our ultimate aspirations are, and why. Now, as you might expect, as a successful business, we believe that businesses do control their own destiny. And what I hope you'll see is that we don't work in isolation, and despite our commitment to operating a sustainable business, the movement to closed loop is not easier because of certain barriers and certain disincentives, some of which are within our control and some of which are not. Now, as a retailer, B&Q drives consumption habits. We go out there and we sell people stuff. And we're responsible for the sourcing of the raw materials, for the finished products, and we're currently dependent on finite resources for their manufacture and their transportation. We employ vast numbers of people, both directly and indirectly, with our industry to drive this agenda forward. So we absolutely acknowledge that we have to change from a linear to a circular system where eventually everything is going to run out. And B&Q has been around for 40 years, and we intend to be around for an awful lot more than 40 years. So this is certainly with a very firm eye on the future. Now, as you can see, this is an enormous challenge, given the number of products we have, given the number of suppliers. But we've had the pleasure of supporting Ellen on what to me looked like an unimaginatively daunting challenge, which she pulled off. And we do feel that we are determined to lead by example, and therefore that's why our partnership with the Foundation feels absolutely right. I'm probably marginally happier setting out to transform B&Q into a closed-loop company than I would be getting on a yacht and going around the world, I can assure you of that. But I think that it will be a very, very long journey and very, very challenging. So whilst that decision to become a founding partner in the Foundation has been quite easy, what we have to do next is going to be less so, and that's what I'd like to cover off with you. So the main challenges. I'll get my slide going here. So the main challenges. Well, in theory, moving to closed loop sounds very logical, potentially very profitable, and relatively easy. But for a retailer like B&Q, it makes sense to explore how we can close the materials loop in our products to eliminate waste. But there are some really key requirements that we know we have to tackle in order to be able to do this. And right now, they could be seen as being fundamentally at odds with our business model. And those challenges are that we have to produce products which potentially can be disassembled after use. Now, that on the face of it sounds fairly straightforward, but the simple fact is B&Q doesn't make a single product. We rely upon these 1,200 producers and their 12,000 producers, and potentially those 12,000 producers, 120,000 producers. So just getting our heads around how we have to redesign products and how we have to take our supply chain with us is going to be an enormous challenge. So one of our first goals is going to be working with and influencing our suppliers. Now, the second challenge that we have, if we are going to move to being a closed-loop company, is how to get those products back from our customers into our stores. Now, right now, again, logistically, we don't take stuff back. Our model is that we take stuff in and we sell it out to people. We do take stuff back that we're legislatively required to, such as batteries, but our whole infrastructure is geared to a sort of one-way flow. And what we'll have to get used to as part of this journey is reversing that and taking stuff back through our networks. Now, there's elements of this that we do. We backhaul an enormous amount of waste. But all of these things superficially will involve challenge and will involve cost, and we have to understand how we're going to deal with those. Now, the third is, of course, to eliminate waste. Now, in a conventional recycling sense, we feel that we're doing fairly well on that. We, as of last month, stand at about 85% of our waste being composted, reused or recycled. A lot of that is backhauled to our central distribution centres, which is giving us a lot of learning about how you reverse the cycle and the flow of goods through your system. And we have a commitment to get to 90% by 2012, and then 98% by 2023, which suddenly seems quite a small gap. I don't quite know where we put it that far out. We'll get to 98% well ahead of that. But meeting these requirements is possible, but it's important to understand that they need to be achieved in a very competitive retail environment where price absolutely matters. Now, some retailers exist in a world where they're able to sell products at a premium to a sector of society who can afford them. Now, B&Q has always been all things to all men. We have always been a value-driven retailer. And that produces its own challenge. And the price paid for a product doesn't just reflect the component materials within it. It reflects how efficient the process is in getting it onto our shelves and ultimately out of our doors. Taking back products, moving them, ensuring the necessary machinery is in place to disassemble them, then sort them out, then repair them, then put on back on the shelf is a huge infrastructure to create. But the long-term benefits should be absolutely huge, particularly in a world of scarce resources, where if we can actually hold on to a resource and just keep cycling it, then actually the notion of sitting on a load of stock doesn't seem quite so scary, because actually, in a way, it becomes an asset. So we're up for the challenge, but we really wouldn't say that we are that we don't face any challenges of this. We are a PLC. We are backed by shareholders. Those shareholders expect to see a return, which means that right now our business is primarily driven by sales and profit. And it means that our business is set up to reward those people who achieve these quantitative goals. with incentives based on meeting certain sales volumes, certain profit targets. And we know that we have to change that. Now, potentially, if this involves higher costs, that will mean one or two things, either less sales or less profit, neither of which we can really contemplate in terms of sales value. But as I can assure you, we will get there. And I think this separation of sales value and volume and impact is absolutely vital. That's something that we need to understand. Now, fortunately, as I said, B&Q has a long heritage in sustainability, and whilst sales, volume and profit is a key driver at B&Q, striving to balance this with sustainability goals is something that the business has been doing for many, many years. And indeed, Ewan now has got, for the first time ever in B&Q's history, a bonusable appraised target based around sustainability, and that is based on our performance with regards to full chain of custody on timber sourcing. And our intention this year is to get our timber policies to timber to 100% policy compliance, and that essentially means 99% of it will have full chain of custody, meaning we can trace it back pretty much to the area of forest where it came from, which I think will be a phenomenal achievement. And now going forward, every year, he and the rest of the board and the leadership structure within B&Q will have sustainability built into their objectives. So, the challenge moving towards home loop systems, inevitably, for the foreseeable future in our business model at least, the immediate commercial success can be at odds with long-term goals. And I think we had a discussion earlier on about, deferred profit and financial benefit versus immediate benefit is somewhat at odds with the current paradigm. And we realised a few years ago that within the home improvement market, there was a tremendous opportunity to help people reduce their own the environmental impact of their own homes. And we introduced a range assessment program called One Planet Home to help make it clear to customers the sort of products that they could buy to lower the impact of their homes. And hello, have I been pressing the wrong button for ages? Sorry about that. There we go. I just saw one of my team laughing and I thought something's up. Now, that range now accounts for 10% of our range. It's doing it on its own, it's not me. That range now accounts for 10% of our overall sales. So it has been tremendously successful. But what we've also we've realised is that to expand this range will require innovation. Now, if you ask the buyers at B&Q whether they think innovation is a good thing, then their answer will be 100% yes, absolutely fantastic. It drives sales, it drives transaction value. But if you ask them if they're prepared to remove or reduce the space on the shelf of an existing product to put in something which is an unknown, which is a risk, where they can't accurately predict the sales or profit outcome, then they aren't quite so keen. Why? Well, it's basically asking to remove something that they know to be profitable with an unknown, which could ultimately be detrimental to their earning capacity, to their appraisal score and everything else. And what we need to do, therefore, is start to incentivize people on issues other than direct profitability. And that's something that we're doing from the very top. Now, I've already touched on it. It may be possible to look at how we incentivize staff, but there's always likely to be a fight for shelf space between those products that will deliver immediate commercial success with those that might offer the business long-term sustainability. So to help us overcome this dilemma, what we've introduced in 2 of our stores is these eco shops. Oh, by the way, I should just say that this presentation is littered with eco and sustainability. I, like Ellen, am trying to wean myself off the terms. But we have introduced these 2 eco shops, and the aim of these is to help give our buyers the opportunity to try new stuff. And I'll come on to some of the products that we're putting into these later on. The idea is that the buyer can take a product which maybe wouldn't hit our normal threshold rates for volume turnover, but can actually go into the stores, can be given a chance to breathe, given a chance to grow, that we can bring in manufacturers and suppliers who can bring those products to us,